Welcome to everyone in crowdsourcing, getting crowdsourcing right. I assume the answer to everyone in means yes, based on you being here. So we have a great lineup of speakers today. I will just introduce everyone individually as we start each talk. First up, we have Nancy Proctor. Oh, yes, grab another chair. We have Nancy Proctor and Dan Davis from the Smithsonian. Nancy is head of mobile strategy and initiatives for the Smithsonian Institution and has spearheaded the Recruit the World mobile strategy for everyone there. And Dan Davis is a multimedia producer at the Smithsonian National Museum of American Indian and been involved in mobile since its beginnings at Smithsonian with the very first mobile website. So they're going to talk about or tackle the mystery of metrics with mobile crowdsourcing initiatives.
Well, thanks for being here today. I have to start with a little bit of an apology. We have some media we want to play, and it's got some audio content that we want you to hear. And I was going to...
You found speakers.
So never mind. I was going to. I saw Tim walk in, so he said to fail, often and quickly. This is what we were about to do, but I think we've pulled one out here, so we have speakers. So to set the stage of what we're going to talk about, I wanted to play a little bit of a video. It's about a minute long to sort of set the stage. This is you're going to hear from Wired editor-in-chief Chris Anderson, who talked at the Smithsonian 2.0 conference, and he's going to be backed up through sort of video magic I put together here of this composer named Eric Whitaker, who crowdsourced a performance of a chorale to sort of put this in context. So let's go ahead and play that. We'll see what the volume is like. All right. Well, those don't seem to work.
So this is crazy. This is just crazy, but just a kind of a thought experiment. So let's assume the following. Let's assume that the smartest people who are on, the best person to curate any single object doesn't work.
So we're back to where we were.
This is kind of a good rule to apply. I think it was Bill Joy first said this about some. The smartest people in the world.
I'm going to assume you can't really hear what he's saying.
I would say the best curator for any given artifact does not work for you if you don't know them. That could be wrong some of the time, but it's probably right most of the time. And not only that, because
so Chris Anderson made the real cogent point that Joy's law is that the smartest people don't really work for your company. So we can assume that as a way to start. You want to paraphrase?
The best person, Chris Anderson said, to curate any given object in your collection probably doesn't work for the Smithsonian. And moreover, you can't find that person, but they can find you if you kind of put your stuff out there and magnetically attract them. So he proposed what he called a sort of a crazy idea, which was a very broad volunteer program which would invite people to kind of come and be curators for the day or ambassadors for a specific object in the collection and spend time photographing it, writing about it, documenting it, and do it all, for free on their own time. And I think the important point that he makes at the end is that the value of this is not necessarily the money that one would save in photographing, digitizing the collection, etc., but really more in the kind of the community you would create, the way that these people would become deeply invested in the institution through these objects that they would represent, and that they would become kind of advocates for the Smithsonian all around the world. So he kind of said maybe this is a crazy idea at the beginning, but he concluded by suggesting that we might think of the Smithsonian as the Wikipedia of the physical world.
And really, the Smithsonian's mobile initiatives and strategies picked up that theme, this idea to recruit the world. The Smithsonian's mission is the increase in diffusion of knowledge, and through the lens of Smithsonian Mobile, that's using mobile platforms to enlist collaborators globally. So what we're really looking to do is think outside the audio tour box. Although I would say that it's also, we're thinking of ways of pulling this into the audio tour box too, because people are kind of used to that tour box. But really, we do want to think how we can expand it. And as Chris Anderson said, you couldn't hear him too well, from we do the talking to we help you do the talking.
So I like to think about this, I'm kind of a visual thinker, as going from headphones, I recognize the kind of traditional audio tour symbol, which indicates a narrowcast experience where content is delivered in a one-way street, as it were, from the voice of the museum to the listener's ears, to microphones, to kind of giving people the tools and the means and the platforms to speak as well about and for and with the institution. And it's really about thinking about what's possible now with these new, pocketable computers that have, most importantly, the ability to connect to networks and thereby to connect people and communities and conversations globally. What does that allow us to do differently now that we couldn't do in the days of the Walkman and the MP3 player?
So recruiting the world is how we're thinking about this. But how do we measure the success of that? How's that going for you? How do we do that? One way to do that is to think about a standard, and we were looking at Wikipedia as this, standard for crowdsourcing.
Kind of the granddaddy of crowdsourcing.
It's the granddaddy of crowdsourcing. And we have a huge base there. 410 million people are monthly are accessing it. Quite a lot of people, 17 million people have signed up. It says commenting, but I think we mean more like you are registered to put in
Edit.
content. Mm-hmm. But a few less, 77,000 of those are producing, and a very small amount of sort of curation at the top. So one way to look at this is looking at the ratio between those who are just sort of tuning in and those who are registered to comment. But that's not real accurate. I think it's probably more accurate to look at the ratio of 1 in 6,000, is going to go ahead and contribute.
Yeah, and we're using here the engagement pyramid, which you all might recognize. It's been around for a while, and I was really interested to see Curtis Wong's kind of reinterpretation of it this morning. But it's trying to describe the sort of the ecosystem or the community, if you will, of engagement in any given project that it kind of ask the public to contribute in some way, where obviously the vast majority of people are relatively passive. Maybe they're just reading Wikipedia or they're just watching your conversation unfold. A smaller number are actually sharing what they're hearing in that conversation. A smaller number still are just making very kind of low effort contributions like commenting. Much smaller actually producing content, and then the smallest number of all is at the top of the pyramid, curating the conversation, so to speak. So yeah, as Dan was saying, we're really looking at, although over 17 million people have editing accounts with Wikipedia, only 77,000 currently are reported as being active contributors. So just 1 in 6,000 if you can make the ratio with the number of kind of passive users of the site.
And quality really is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, that's in the context. We can't really, I don't know if we can evaluate that, but we can evaluate engagement.
Yeah.
So at Smithsonian Mobile, to date, we've done a little more than 30 mobile projects. But today we're going to be looking at 3 of those projects. The Smithsonian Mobile sort of guide to the Smithsonian, Stories from Main Street, which is a project of Sites, which is the Smithsonian Institution traveling exhibitions, and Access American Stories, which is an app that's being used at our American History Museum. But let's start with Smithsonian Mobile, and Nancy, since you are at the head of that, why don't you tell us what that's all about?
So this is one of the earlier projects that we've done at the Smithsonian, and frankly we're just re-embarking now on a kind of a redevelopment of it on the basis of what we learned in what I call kind of version 1, or it was almost our beta. And this is the app that originally, we were kind of asked to build the Smithsonian Uber app, and we had a donor who wanted to fund that. And kind of both ethically and practically, I didn't that idea of an Uber app didn't sit with me. I just didn't think it would work when you're talking about an institution as diverse as ours, to kind of have one that dominates everything. So we instead kind of reconceived it as a universal plug, as kind of the place that everything else mobile at the institution could plug into, which basically dictated a very particular kind of information architecture. And I'll confess that we really have struggled with figuring out what's a good interface to that vast amount of content and information. You know, all the exhibitions that are on at the Smithsonian, all of the events from docent tours to IMAX cinema shows, access to searching 9 million collection objects.
19 museums.
19 museums, their maps, their floor plans of various floors. And, I think we did okay. But one of the things that I think is most interesting about this project is we had a real challenge because we had enough money to build the app, but not enough money for content and for maintaining the app over time. And as you all know, if you can't keep the content fresh, the thing dies. So we tried to turn that into an opportunity, kind of echoing this idea of recruiting the world, which was also being developed with our strategy at the same time, which was we put in kind of crowdsourcing tools. So the app allows visitors to leave text comments and upload photos from their visit. And what we've tried to do is ask our visitors to kind of give hints to other visitors about how to get the most out of their time at the Smithsonian. And like I said, I think this is kind of the first step, and we're now, from the feedback and our usage, trying to figure out better interfaces and calls to action and ways to get people engaged in that.
And this is something that really scared the hell out of us, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
this was not, I mean, we did this, but really the idea, the crazy idea, if you will, is turning the app inside out. Okay, we don't have enough content, so
Can you help us?
Can you help us?
Yeah.
It's a great way to engage, but, well,
But
let's
even,
look at maybe we
even
shouldn't look at the
scarier
metric.
was the question, so how's that going?
Oh, okay. Very
Right?
scary.
And I mean, again, so I thought, well, let's make this comparison, say, again, using the engagement pyramid and looking at, other projects against which to compare ourselves. So at the base of our pyramid, we've had about 62,500 downloads of the app to date. And it launched in August of 2011. And we've only had 75 unique individuals contribute content to the app so far. Fortunately, because really all the contributions have been perfectly legitimate, we have not had the problem that everybody was most afraid of people, contributing pictures of their friends' bums and things like that. So we have somebody very, very part-time actually kind of going in periodically and checking that the content's all fine, so curating at the top of the pyramid, and that is a Smithsonian staff member.
Yeah, and you can, we'll look at the ratio there, but one thing that we realized is we don't look at the number of contributions, we look at unique users, so we might have thousands of comments, but there could be some very motivated, strange person who put up 500 of them.
Yes.
But we didn't get that, unfortunately.
No, we didn't. It would be a nice problem to have in some ways. We'd actually recruit that person straight away. But so at the moment, we've got about 1 in 800 users is actually contributing content to the app, if we want to kind of have a ratio to be able to make a comparison with Wikipedia. So on one level, we can say, well, that's a better ratio than Wikipedia is getting, arguably. Does that mean it's a success? I really don't know. And that's kind of why we wanted to do this paper with this community, was ask for your thoughts on that as we start to try to figure out how we can measure success in crowdsourcing. And each one is basically contributing about 3 comments on average.
Stories from Main Street is an app that Sites did, our traveling exhibition service. So it's an app that's not on the mall, but it travels around the country, and it's built on Halsey Bergen's Roundware software platform that is an easy way for people to be able to record their comments, and in this case, stories. So what it provides is a way to very simply either add a story or listen. And when you're listening, you're kind of listening to this stream of comments. It's like an ongoing train or a radio that's playing. It's very beautiful, very simple, developed by an artist, and we really hopped on this as something that we felt that was going to be a great way to engage our listeners, our visitors, and it's been very, very successful. I mean, we've had People from throughout the country have contributed. We've had one single contributor. We're talking about I shouldn't say crazies. One enthusiastic contributor contributed 10 stories from upstate New York, and so we feel like it's really successful, and really it was ranked very high in the education category with very little promotion or marketing. So it's been quite a success. And looking at the engagement pyramid for stories from Main Street, about 17,000 downloads so far, and a high number of contributors. 500 have contributed. Again, not a huge amount of curation, but in this case, just incidentally, we're looking into this. We've had actually deleted 500 comments, so we've had 1,000 comments. Many of them were false starts. Many of them were outside of the geolocation. There's a geolocation component.
Because Stories from Main Street is supposed to be about life in small town America, and we've been very interested to see that a lot of people from abroad are leaving comments in the app, some of them in languages that none of us speak. But that's kind of cool, you know.
It's cool.
It's an
Not what we
interesting
wanted.
problem to have. It wasn't
Right.
the design, but something, as you say, we're thinking about.
We're thinking about it, and you know, some of these I guess have blue language in them, language that's not G-rated, and maybe that's because they're out in the field. Maybe they're not in the museum. Maybe that's why that's happening. Maybe it's because you're telling a story and that just makes you want to swear a lot when you get excited. I don't know. We're looking into that.
But one in 32 people who've downloaded the app are actually contributing. So that is a really kind of interesting shift up in those ratios in terms of monitoring how the different apps do in terms of engagement for contributors anyway, content contributors.
And Access American Stories is an app that also uses the Roundware platform. The idea behind it was our accessibility office came to the mobile strategies and initiatives and said, hey, listen, we have this problem. It's an ongoing problem. What experience can we provide for low sight and blind visitors? And you know, one way to do that is providing visual descriptions of objects. So we thought, hey, well, why don't we create this app that allows visitors to contribute visual descriptions of the objects. There's also we can put in museum voices as well. So right now you can choose between museum and visitor descriptions of that objects. Again, it creates an experience. So it's definitely outside the audio tour box. This is you can listen to this kind of stream of descriptions of what's in the gallery. There's options to describe talk about what you've heard as well, so we can kind of get an asynchronous conversation going. It's been we're very interested in it,
Yeah.
and it's basically a beta kind of a program so far.
And I think one of the most interesting outcomes has been that even people who are fully sighted seem to find it interesting to hear how other people describe objects. So it is a way of kind of getting people to look more closely. But more practically speaking, when you're an institution of 139 million collection objects, I mean, frankly, we will never have enough staff, enough time, and enough money to professionally record verbal descriptions of all of our objects, even if we were just to limit ourselves to the stuff on display and English. You can imagine, really achieving our mission of accessibility really is only possible with the help of the entire world.
And this is something we feel like we can ask the visitors to do. Describe what you're looking at, and benefit other people. It's also, as all crowdsourcing or community sourcing, it's really a way to engage the visitors to create this sort of stakeholdership. At this point,
You do your interpretive dance version.
So here's a recording our visitor left, and it sounds something like this. It has a little finesse. He says, "Come here, Watson." I need you. So he starts with that, and then he describes the object in very good detail. And it's nice, but here's a visitor who has a little finesse.
And this is one of our quote-unquote crazies. We love him. He came back like 5 times and overall recorded over 10 recordings. So this guy's fabulous.
And we also get some of, what we think pulls out what this Joy's law, like this is interpretation that we wouldn't have within the museum. It might even be interpretation that our curators might object to a little bit, but very interesting. A gentleman left a description of this cotton gin and also mentioned that he felt like the label could have reflected the bittersweet nature of the cotton gin, how it kind of, let slavery go on for a little longer, and that's something that isn't in the label. Whether that's endorsed by the curators, I don't know, but now a visitor has put that into the conversation, which is very, very interesting and significant. Also, it's a way for people to say, hey, what else could we have included? And hey, what about the first edition, Obama's Spider-Man? That would be great in here. And I think Obama will use Spider-Man's help in this next 4 years. I don't know, he might need that. But it's great to hear straight from the audience. There's a lot of satisfaction with this app because you can hear your comments in this stream as you're benefiting.
And I love this one in particular because it's a 10-year-old boy who'd been visiting. He says he'd been there visiting with his grandma, and they were talking about what else should be in this exhibition of iconic American objects, and this was what they came up with together. So you also see the app as a platform that stimulates conversation and interaction among visitors, which is always a great thing.
So here, we haven't had a ton of downloads. This is a beta release, about 900 downloads, 28 unique users. So the ratio is very good.
It's similar to Stories from Main Street.
It is,
which
right.
is interesting since they're both built on the same platform, and we're kind of wondering, is that what's conditioning the ratio of downloads to usage? Is there something about the platform that's making us design these experiences in very similar ways, and so we're getting similar results? And above all, is this good? Is this a good result? I don't know.
Well, one distinction between the first project, which is the Smithsonian Mobile project, and these two, is that these two really explicitly say, here's what we want you to do, here's how this works. And Smithsonian Mobile, the commenting is part of it, but it's less explicit, and we're thinking about that. I think it's really important to remember, if you want something from the visitor, you need to ask them for what you're asking. Here's what we'd like you to do. Can you describe objects for us? Can you tell a story?
Legitimately, a lot of people who download Smithsonian Mobile just want to use the maps, and they're not interested in participating in anything, and that's fine too. But how do we get the numbers to show up, to management so they feel like, oh, this is an app worth investing in further?
So we wanted to show you this Amy Sample Ward. Well, this isn't really her graphic, but this is sort of her idea. We're here in the middle. This is our organization, and around us is the community. It's our database. It's the people attend our events, connected to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or right in the area. And the network we don't know them, but they know the community, and we're wanting to convert those people into our community. And then there's the crowd. We don't know them. They can find us. They could know us, but they get messages via the network. So crowdsourcing invites diversity by encouraging anybody with an idea and an interest to participate, and it really levels the playing field. So it isn't just this community. I mean, community sourcing is probably what we're doing, but it really is open. People can find us. They can contribute.
And I think as we do kind of start trying to get a little bit more professional about our metrics and analyzing our crowdsourcing projects, we do need to kind of approach projects with the question, is this a crowdsourcing project? In which case we would expect to have a lot of downloads and a much smaller number of people actually contributing at the top of the pyramid in proportion to that broad base. Or is this a community sourcing project? Is this one where we're, going after people who we know very well, they know us, we know there's a subject matter interest in common, like the bird watchers of Washington, D.C. It's probably a lot easier to market a project and an app to them than it is to just kind of the great unknown, where you would need a really, a Hollywood-sized marketing budget to be very scattergun and just kind of approach the crowd indiscriminately. And I think the final thing that we're kind of thinking about, and again, this kind of pyramid is just, for me, a useful prop, is to what extent is this pyramid of engagement layers in a cake where these different audiences are very distinct one from another, or to what extent is this actually an ecosystem, where people move through different roles in the pyramid at different times? And do we need to think, particularly in crowdsourcing applications and community sourcing applications, about providing content and experiences that serve our users, our collaborators really, at each different stage, at each different level of interaction in the pyramid? Because you probably want different kinds of content if you're kind of in the passive watching stage. Maybe these are the people who are downloading the app because they want the maps of the galleries and they want to know what exhibits are on, etc. And you would need different kinds of content, different kinds of activities and calls to action if you're actually wanting to collaborate and contribute. Is it really possible for those two different kinds of content and experiences to coexist in a single app? I think it's a huge design challenge, and I think it's going to take us a lot of getting it wrong before we get it right. But I'd love, again, to hear from you all if you have some good examples or want to kind of contribute to this discussion.
And I just wanted to mention real quickly about this idea of metrics. We do have to be real careful. We're finding things we can measure so that we can find a way to make it better. But when we look at the bottom run, watching, what we're looking at is number of downloads. Have people used the app? Have people deleted the app? I mean, so it's a little misleading. It's the same thing as saying, hey, we've had X amount of contributions. Well, how many people contributed? And that's something that we want to really think about. And we really have to be careful in looking at these metrics. Are the metrics the most important thing, or what people did? Is that the most part? Or is it really the engagement that's the most important part of this?
And clearly every project's going to have different goals that we're going after. But one of the kind of most inspiring and useful things that I've read recently on crowdsourcing was a set of blog posts by Trevor Owens from the Library of Congress. And he's very graciously kind of combined them all into a wonderful article that's about to come out in the next issue of Curator Journal. So look out for that. And he makes the point that probably the greatest value of crowdsourcing is not the work product. So it's not the fact that you've gotten a bunch of people to do work for you for free, or they've generated a bunch of metadata. That's the most valuable thing to the institution or your museum. It's really more the fact that you've engaged them in the mission of the museum, that they've kind of become part of the team and really dedicated themselves to the work and what you're trying to achieve. That in some way they're kind of being curators, or they're being archivists, or they're being active members of the staff, and that will have the most profound and important lasting benefits both for our collaborators and for the institution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most radical outcome that we can get, that if we can, as we're recruiting the world, we're creating stakeholders. We're not just creating a bunch of stuff.
Yes, and free staff.
And free staff,
Anyway,
although we may need that.
We need that too. So if you all do want to continue the conversation, there are coordinates. And I think we might have a couple of minutes for a question or
We can
two.
take a couple of questions, sure. Any questions?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Tina, producer. You mentioned statistics versus following and looking at the engagement itself for digital purposes. Do you actually have analytics and codes included in any of these apps?
Short answer is no, except for our mobile websites. And it's a real problem. And it's interesting, we put it into every single contract that there have to be analytics, and somehow at the end of the project, it's never there.
Right. The analytics would help a lot. I mean, the downloads. It's like
We have that dumb data
Yeah,
from
right.
iTunes.
It's like, how many
afterwards.
visitors did you have at your museum? It's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, but they used the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think that can help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Finding out what happens after someone.
And we are working towards improving this. And very much inspired by the great analytic work that you all have done at Tate. So thank you
Just
for.
to say we don't have any analytics in our mobile apps as well.
But you've got great stuff on the web, so it's a model
Yeah.
for us all to follow.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And probably saw me nodding in agreement, just because I get to work with them which is very fortunate. So I understand. All right. Oh,
Thanks.
great.
Let's see, so you need,
So next up,
Yeah.
while they hook up, is Joaquin Ortiz
Get those
from
speakers.
the Digital Interpretation Manager.
I'm actually the director of education.
Yeah, that's right. You are the Director of Education now at the Museum of Photographic Arts, or MOPA.
Hold on.
or do you want to?
And standing in for Alejandro is Vivian Kung Haga, both from Balboa Park in sunny California. So happy to have you here. And they're going to share their initiative to give museum visitors the power to choose content for an exhibition in a really fun and engaging way. And their project's called Soapbox, The Audience Speaks.
So we're going to do this like in a little bit of a circular storytelling fashion. So I'm going to show you what we did with Soapbox and what the interface is like, and then Vivian's going to talk to you about the first phase and how we did some initial research as well as user testing and other projects to get a sense of what we wanted to do for our final, and then I'll explain what we did in terms of how we reached what you're about to see right now. So Soapbox is a touchscreen interface developed in IDM's Open Exhibits platform that allows our visitors to look at 120 different images from the collection and then rate them on a scale of 1 to 4. So you see, we go down here. This is the splash screen that they would start with when they come up to the table. And so because we wanted to make it an even and unbiased system, the way that it works is that every image comes up randomly. No image will be seen twice in a given session. So what happens is when a user comes up, they're able to go ahead and choose a rating. Mind you, we're no longer collecting data, so I'm just going to randomly press buttons here. Of course, some I have a huge bias towards and certain other ones I don't. So, and we built in some different features in this. So the primary function, of course, is just to go ahead and rate the images that you like. You were also able to share the images. So what you could do is when you clicked on the share, you would be able to enter an email address. And what it would do is it would keep track of the images that you chose to share with yourself or with somebody else. And at the end of the session, it would send you an email that would have the links to our website that would let you look at all the different images. It would also save that information. If you notice over here on the left-hand side, you see where it says next badge to go 5. And what it is as you're going and as you're rating images, it's keeping count out of the 120 of how many you've done. And once you reach a specific level of rating so many, first you earn a badge. And so we based all the badges on cameras, like vintage cameras that we thought were kind of neat looking, that would be accessible for people. And then we ended up having, we thought that was a good basis, at least on a base incentive, but we wanted to give people something else that was exclusive to this particular experience that they couldn't get anywhere else. So we ended up shooting a bunch of videos that were behind the scenes content about the people who work at the museum or the exhibitions that they were seeing. So the first one was just a thank you from the director. So she brought in her dog actually to come and hang out, and the dog was very willing to be a little actor within the video, although at this point the dog was starting to become a little recalcitrant, as you can see, because after like 5 takes, he wasn't very happy about getting treats anymore. He just wanted to cruise around. But so, we just wanted to have something that was a little bit extra. And so we had for instance, the behind the scenes video that showed what it was like when we do the installation for a show. Or we took specific images that were in the 120 we selected and had some of our curators come through and just talk a little bit more about why the image is interesting and what would be inspiring about that. And so, so that was the basic system. There's also, there's a display on screen button here. One of the things that was really neat about this is if you hit that, we actually had a 65-inch television above the 40-inch touch table. So when you did that, you would actually be able to view the image there on the screen. And that was also really a nice way to be able to share it with the rest of the people in the gallery. And also when groups are using this, they could all look at it at the same time. So yes, also we went through and developed a whole system that would turn everything into Spanish for us. So once you switched over, you can switch back and forth as you need to. It didn't necessarily change any of the information for the artist information, but it did change all the instructional activities. So for instance, if you get help. Oh, come on, help. Oh, help's not working right now. Interesting. Anyways, but also it would change over the about. Oh, interesting. Some of these aren't working right now. But anyways, that's not the important stuff. So, so the goal is that we basically kept this up for for 3 months and collected data on all these 120 images by having visitors come through and test this out. We also had the same interactive, reformatted slightly differently, but it did the exact same thing online so that even people who weren't coming in to visit the museum could contribute to the show. And we took all that information, we turned it into an actual exhibition. So I'm going to have Vivian talk about where the project started from, and then again, I'll go into after that what it came down to and how we turned it into what you see right now.
Right. So the actual project, it was an IMLS funded project, and the goal was actually to create a interactive that would actually allow the visitors to become the curators. We wanted to give them the voice, have them tell us what they felt was important in our collection, and wanted to create a physical exhibition related to it. But we wanted to do this in an interactive way. We, at MOPA, we were still experimenting with technology. We didn't know exactly what type of interface we wanted. And so what we did is we actually partnered with the University of California, San Diego. They have a program called Prime where they actually work with undergraduate students, computer programmers, and they send them overseas to a Pacific Rim country for the summer, and they work on a specific project full-time for 3 months. And we happened to connect with a professor in Japan who was working on how do you merge technology and art together. And he had actually physically created a touch table for an exhibit at NARA. And the touch table had been sitting there for a year after the exhibition, and he had no use for it. And somehow he got connected with us. And what we wanted to do was actually do some prototyping and testing. So we had 2 students who went overseas to Japan. They worked on the touch table we had, and they worked with open exhibits. We knew that we wanted to use open exhibits because it was an open source platform. We liked the features of it. And they prototyped a first version of this for us. And we were fortunate in that our contact in Japan also had an exhibition that he was going to, that he would premiere his technology. It was an exhibition that was for basically anyone who was visiting Osaka. And we had essentially over 12,000 people visit in a 3-day span. And what we did is we created surveys and evaluations. We tracked how many people actually created a mini gallery. So our first version was called My Gallery, and it allowed people to look at 50 images from the collection, and they could actually select 10 of their favorites and create their own mini collection or gallery. And what we learned from that is that we needed to keep everything to one screen. We actually have 3 screens, and we saw a lot of drop-off as people went from the first screen to the second screen to the third. We also noticed that people wanted more images. They also did not spend a lot of time creating a title and a name for each of the sets. With the first prototype, because we were in Japan, we were able to experiment with multi-languages. We actually had a Japanese keyboard, actually 3 different Japanese keyboards for the different types of languages in Japan. And so it gave us a lot of great data in terms of what we should do and should not do. Plus, because we were using student programmers, it was very inexpensive as well. We essentially paid for their plane fare to go overseas, and then they created this prototype for us. So we definitely learned a lot from that, and that actually fed what we did for Soapbox. And what you saw with Soapbox was that it's only one interface, it's only one page, and all the features are on that one page, essentially.
So again, after the students got back from Japan, we collated and sorted out this data, and we decided that we wanted to do something more simple. We were happy with what we had done with the first interface, and we're still using it like in a classroom setting to like allow students to kind of like find connections between artwork and be thoughtful about what they title it and whatnot. But we just found like it sitting in the gallery by itself wasn't very effective. So we decided to go back to our original intent, which was how do we just gather data to create an exhibition? We want to focus on that first and foremost. So the other thing that the format former director of education was really, really picky about is she felt that her whole purpose behind this was that she wanted the audience to be the curators. And the thing was that as soon as we start choosing images, we start making those curatorial decisions. We start sitting down and saying, well, really, this is the best piece from his work during that period and those sort of things. And, we have this and this and this. So we decided that if we wanted to have 40 total images in the show, that to make sure that we had a big enough variety without getting too crazy and chaotic in terms of copyright management and everything else, we should get like 120 images total to put on the device. So what we did is we used a random number generator, and we went and we let it just select random pieces from the collection without us having any say over what went in or not. The only way that we put any kind of voice within that is if it wasn't like family appropriate for the galleries, because we have some stuff in our some things that are a little sexual or whatnot. Also maybe just some things that are hard to see. There were some that when we put them onto the screen, it didn't look as good, and so we made some of those choices, but more from a technical standpoint. Otherwise, everything that ended up in the 120 available was completely just directly from that random number generator. So we really thought that would be a better way of giving the visitors just a slice of the collection to make some decisions out of. We had originally talked about having like a whole commentary system and having some other things going in with it, but what we learned from the last interface is people weren't as thoughtful about that part, that they didn't really want to leave a bunch of stuff for us. They just wanted to tell us what they liked. So we decided that just to try and focus on the one screen that you guys saw here, and really just focus on a very simple 1 to 4 system to try and give them some spectrum to try and rate on. We were aware that the mathematics was a little funky in terms of we're going to get this weird average, because also since every image is coming up randomly, not every single image is going to come up the same amount of times. But we knew that they would average out pretty close, and in the final numbers it did. We also knew that the overall ratings were going to be somewhere between 1 to 1.1 to 3.9 and 4. And it would just fall kind of within there. So we weren't as much worried about the data. We just more focused on just let's try to get something out and up so that we have a ranking from 1 to 120, and then we'll take those top 40 and turn them into an exhibit. So we started playing around with the idea of the technology, and we built this rating system, and we got that going pretty quick because the students already had a lot of the tools already going with open exhibits. And so they designed the interface, the look, all that stuff. What we found was that we started bringing in a whole bunch of groups of adults and other people to do some user testing. They really liked looking through the images, and they were surprised because they weren't able to see a lot of the stuff before, because we can only put up so many images from our collection into the galleries. We have a lot of traveling shows. It's not always our focus. So here's a way of sharing a lot more with them. What we found though is the kids got bored within 10 images. And we had always guessed that, people weren't going to sit down and do the whole 120. We figured it would probably take about 20 minutes to rate all of them, and that was a lot of time to ask from a visitor. So we started kind of poking around and figuring out what could we get to get people to do a little bit more than 10 though? And so what we came up with was this whole badging system, which I honestly, we just stole from Foursquare. But so, the idea was that, we wanted to have some kind of extrinsic motivation, something that they could earn along the way. And we started testing that with the kids, and that seemed to work a lot better. That they weren't as much interested in the art, but because they were earning a reward along the way, they started to become more involved in trying to make this into a process. We also recognized that the badge was one thing that they got to earn, but we wanted to give them something a little more, something that was very exclusive to MOPA, because the badges, again, are pretty ubiquitous on the internet these days. So that's how we started working on the videos. We felt like if we can show them something behind the scenes and also something that informs them a little bit more about the images that they're seeing, that would really be a benefit to the people who are using it. So we focused on that system. The other thing that we did is that, so there's 6 total badges, 120 total images, but we didn't do 20, 20, 20, 20, because what we thought was, we wanted people to get to that first badge relatively easily. So you can see that there's a number counting down there. So the first badge is just, you only have to rate 10 images, which is what we thought most people would rate on average anyway. The next one is 15, the next one after that is 20, and then it goes to 25, but then it stays at 25, so it plateaus at that point. But we did want to have some small level of challenge, so that way they had to work a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And so so we worked for a while on developing that system. We rolled that out with kids and adults. All of them really liked it. Their biggest thing at that point was basically that they wanted to make sure that if they earned that stuff, they got to keep it. So we had to build that back also into the email system to make sure that not only did they receive the images that they really liked, but they also had to receive links to the videos as well as the badges that they received. So there's this whole complex back end for all of this. And then we had to turn all of that and then turn it into a whole web component that was fueled by Drupal as well as MySQL.
Right. And we had to make sure the data from both the touch table and the website were all combined so that when we did the final tally, they would have accurate numbers from both interfaces as well.
And so the decision we made at that time was that we wanted that to be real time, which personally I regret now because it was difficult. But so the way that we did that is we had, again, this MySQL backend that was on the internet collecting each individual vote. And then what would happen was then that all that information was fed back and forth between the two devices. So on the internet to all the users who would be using it at the same time and back to the table in the galleries. That ended up being kind of the hardest part. And then, of course, it completely relied on having that internet backbone. So when the internet went out or if the device got disconnected accidentally, votes weren't being collected. And, we had challenges in terms of sometimes it wouldn't be sending the information back to the table. So it was collecting data. But then if you notice here, I'm going to go back real quick. When it's not connected to its little home base on the internet, if you want to go and look at the rankings, it has to have that data to go look at. So when you go and look at the view rankings area, nothing comes up. And so this is a big disappointment for people who felt like they just did a bunch of work and they came and were like, there's nothing even there. This is all blank. So that was something that we ended up having to really have our front desk staff really monitor and check on, about 3 or 4 times a day to make sure that it was connected. And if it wasn't, somebody had to be notified or the device had to be restarted. So we didn't plan for some of that front end work, of course. And in the long run, we really figured out that it was going to take a little bit more effort than we suspected on that. But it did work when it was up and running, and it did give people real-time results that matched on the internet and on the table. So.
And then for anyone who did all 120, not only did they get the badges, but when the show actually went up, they were also named on the walls as well.
Yeah, so we collected, and it was an opt-in choice, but you could leave your name, and then we collected all that data, and we've created a list of people who were contributors to the show. So. Surprisingly, very few people wanted to leave their names, and a lot of people thought that they were leaving their email address for something. So we got a lot of email addresses that we ended up having to truncate because we didn't want to publicly display anyone's email address. So I think it was like 150 people that left it. So that's not too bad. So basically, we had this up for 3 months. Basically, during this past summer, it opened about mid-May. It closed in the data collection closed in about mid-August. The device was still there, and people could still do the activity, but we notified people that the decision had already been made. We collected over 101,000 votes, like individual ratings, and we weren't able to measure the specific user amount necessarily. We created some general averages, but we felt like it was hard to tell because what we started to find was there were the casual users. Well, for one thing, the table in the galleries was almost always in use. We saw people waiting for it frequently. There'd be lines to use it, but then we found that there was the casual user who came in, tried it for a while, enjoyed it, walked away. There was a lot of people, especially groups of people, that were determined to get all 120 done. And that what it started to do was create a lot of conversation, which we hadn't built that into here. That was always part of the goal, but we weren't sure how to strategize within this interface of how do you prompt somebody to start talking about it. But what we found is visitors started doing it on their own. So groups of people, and especially intergenerational audiences, would have these discussions around how should we rate this image and what should we do with this. And it was really interesting to kind of hang out in the galleries and see how much thought that they would put into it. And you notice there's this timeout screen. Frequently I would see people talking about stuff and then they'd have to oh my God, it's going to time out, because they got so into the discussion of it and the value of it and what were they as a group going to discuss. Because in some ways it's very much designed for a single user experience, but we found that groups actually really liked using it, especially because we displayed it on such a large display. And so, again, we collected the data, and the exhibition actually just opened in mid-October. We took the top 40 images, and then the 3 bottom-rated images, which actually the one that you're seeing right there was one of the bottom 3, unfortunately. And basically we did a comparison. So we have the top 3 and the bottom 3 rated against each other. We didn't rank any of the images because we didn't want to imply anything to our audience or to the artists that one was better than the other. But our curators took what came out of it and just found groupings and natural selections they felt worked together and created an exhibition out of it. And it was an interesting challenge for them. And our visitors have been really satisfied with it. We're actually doing an evaluation on it right now. We'll share the data when that goes. But the other thing that we want to let you know is that we are going to be sharing this software in itself. Because we use open exhibits as an open source platform, the intent is to eventually share the interface as well. So we'll have to take out all of our copyrighted images, of course. But keep your eyes out because it'll be going up on the IDM website.
And the My Gallery, the first interface, is actually already available as an open source platform on open exhibits as well. So you can actually pull the first version. But I definitely, one of the things that we did do right with both of these projects is not only look at the actual data that came through with the interface, but also do a lot of user testing. We did a lot of screen capture and user testing with the first one, first prototype, as well as actual on-site with the final version, and then the same thing with Soapbox. And that really helped inform the actual final product. And if you do the user testing early on, you can make those changes along the way to make it a better experience for your visitors.
That's pretty much everything I have. You good? Cool.
Any questions?
Yep.
Excellent. Plenty of time for questions.
You mentioned the museum's curators toward the end. Was there much persuading that needed to happen on the front end of this thing?
If you can repeat the questions.
Something they wanted to be part of?
So he's asking if because we mentioned the curators kind of at the end of the process, and so was there any resistance from them in terms of using it in this way? So why don't you start with that?
Well, one of the things that has been interesting in the Museum of Photographic Art, I started as the director of education and eventually became the deputy director. And then we also had our founding director leave and then a new director come in. And she actually was a former director of education and curator and then director. So what happened essentially is, over the last several years at the Museum of Photographic Arts, there was a shift between traditional curatorial practices to a more visitor-centered practice at the museum. Part of that is that the curatorial staff was outnumbered with directors, and that there was also a director of education, myself, and my director. 3 of us outnumbered the one director of exhibitions. But we really saw a need to shift as an institution to more visitor-focused initiatives, because we are a relatively small institution. We're in a very compact space in Balboa Park, competing with lots of other entertainment attractions like the zoo and SeaWorld, as well as the other institutions. And there has been a lot of evaluation and studies going on at Balboa Park in terms of the visitor experience. And a lot of what came out of it was really that the traditional curatorial practice of very long labels and lots of scholarly information doesn't work for the visitors. That's not what they're always looking for. So it took a lot of convincing, definitely. But this was something that we did involve the curators early on. They were part of all the discussions. They were part of the prototyping. They actually selected the initial 50 that we actually prototyped for my gallery. And then, so we slowly eased them into the process. So by the time we got to Soapbox, they were already involved, and they knew that it was going to be a random selection at that point. And they helped actually decide what type of random selection we would do.
And once we got it up and running, it was about kind of selling it to them as like, so yeah, you're going to lose some of your curatorial voice here, but you're going to have it in another way here, in a new challenge that you may have never tried before. And our curators are relatively young, and they were interested in that idea of doing that. So, and again, the education department's much larger than the curatorial department at my museum, so we get to be the bullies in that case and make those decisions. And so in that case, it worked, and they're very happy with what came out on the other end, even though they were a little skeptical at first. So.
And I have to say, you do have to keep in mind there was a cultural shift within the institution that allowed that, where the education department grew bigger than the curatorial department. That definitely was not the case when I arrived as the director of education.
But I will say real quick, the director, who's our primary curator in some ways, the 3 lowest images are her 3 favorites, and she was upset about that. So that's just how it goes sometimes. How about over here?
Maybe I missed it, but what could you do with those badges once you got them?
I mean, they were sent to you as images, so you just got to keep them. You could share them, whatever. We talked about doing more Facebook integration. The only reason we didn't do that is because we were having a hard time getting open exhibits to do that whole thing in terms of connecting to Facebook and going through that route. And we didn't want to offer it on the web if we couldn't offer it on the table. We really wanted the experiences to be the same. After having done this, we may not do it that same way again, because we got feedback on that people wish they could have right there pressed the button and had it go out. And we're working on tools to hopefully do that at some point in the future.
I thought it was interesting that so many people either gave email addresses or didn't want to have their name on the wall. That does seem like that would be an incentive. Do you think that you could have explain that a little bit better? Do you think that was, because it just seems like, why would you put an email address? That seems like there was confusion.
It was confusion. I think that we should have stated better in the exhibition on the label text and right at the front that if you did all 120, you got to put your name into the exhibition. I think there was some confusion over that, especially as we tested people on the back end about what they thought, and they were like, oh, I didn't even realize I would get to do that. But then for some people, it wasn't that big of a motivation. They were more motivated by just doing the thing. And surprisingly, a lot of users that I talked to just on a personal level were just like, well, it's not as important to me as just having a chance to contribute. So.
Is it time for me to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just kind of struck listening to you, and I was also at the citizen science session earlier today, that it seems like your project was really designed to encourage visitor engagement, right? It didn't actually have a research focus or a desired outcome in terms of, I don't know, discovering something about the collection or changing your curatorial practice necessarily. Is that correct? It was really about the... I'm actually thinking in contrast, in the citizen science session, they were saying, the guy from Galaxy Zoo was saying that one of their principles is you don't ask people to do stuff that's not a real research problem in citizen science, and that actually they found in getting people to participate, the thing that motivated people most was what it would do, what their participation would do for the science and for the scientists, rather than what it did for them. And so I'm just trying to understand if yours is kind of the inverse of that, where it was all about the visitor and what it would be for them, the badges for them, and the engagement, and what, if anything, were the goals of what the institution would get out of it, other than, obviously improve community and all that.
Yeah, for us, really, it was breaking down that barrier of, a visitor and a curator and not giving them a voice. And especially with photography is a very democratic art form in that everybody has a camera, everybody can take photographs. So we really wanted to open this up to the visitors in that you can have a voice, you can actually make the decision in terms of what images should be on the walls, what images do have value. And we wanted to also experiment with that idea in terms of whether or not that would be a different selection than what we would have actually put up.
And is your director, the chief curator, going to change the curatorial practice in response to the fact that her 3 favorite objects were the crowd's 3 least favorite objects?
Everybody's a photographer.
But we are going to continue. We're going to continue offering these kind of experiences for our visitors in a variety of different ways. So we're rethinking about our film programming, and we're thinking about, instead of offering what we want to offer, having our visitors choose more of the films that we offer through our music. We've learned a lot from this, and we think that there's a way of sharing that voice so that we do make a selection. I mean, obviously, at some point, a curatorial selection has been made to have those things in the collection. So then we just wanted to have a slice that was given to the visitors to make that decision from there. Right. So, I mean, I think for us, it is more about what the visitor gets back out of it. And it's also about, for us, I think, because we're educators, like we wanted to see more of that kind of educational standpoint. And like I said, for the first iteration of this, the My Gallery Interactive that we had, it was built around this educational idea of like, how can we get people to group galleries and order them and title them and have all these things? And what we kept on finding is people didn't like it that way, and we're just interested in that part. Where they were more interested in is their favorite parts. And most of the galleries that were submitted that we saved were labeled my favorites. And so we just thought maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. Like maybe that's not what our visitors want. We should go and ask them first what they want, work from their data, rather than assuming that it has to help us first. Maybe it should help them first, because we do a lot of things for ourselves. So, I mean, it's not like this took over the whole museum. By the way, it's one small gallery. I think it's a quarter of the museum currently, like a quarter or a fifth maybe. Yeah, because it's that one small one, so it's not that much.
I do have to say that I know from the director, it really has changed how she thinks about the museum and how to engage the visitors. I know now that I work at the Balboa Park Online Collaborative and we deal mostly with the technology side of it, she and I have had conversation where she recognizes that, she's of a generation that is not immersed in current technologies, and, going forward, instead of the museum deciding what technology should be implemented and what type of interfaces and interactions should be there, she really wants to bring it to the younger audience and have them design the interactives and using the museum's content though. And so that's really how it's changed her thinking in terms of less in terms of, okay, here's how we're going to present it, but how do you want to learn about the content that we have and how it's best to present it in a way that you're going to be engaged in it.
And I guess my last comment on that is actually the one statement that we really heavily got was that people liked having the option to select. What they would really like to know is that because we're the experts and know a lot about the art, how can we tell them more about the art through a system like this? And we didn't realize that until kind of later on in the process. But it's something we would rethink about next time, is providing either interpretive videos or some extra content to help you better contextualize the images before they made a rating. So.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
he's
raising his hand.
I mean, I don't want to take up your time.
I was going to say that the distinction between citizen science and what they're doing really has to do with, the citizen science, they're really trying to crowdsource objective, quantifiable data, but more often than not. Whereas what you're talking about is a subjective experience, and that's perfectly valid in the spectrum of what art museums are really all about. So I think to compare them might.
Well, it's both. It's engagement. So you're engaging people, but the
Yeah, just to
outcomes are
clarify,
great.
I'm interested in the distinction because I'm trying to map out a field of types of crowdsourcing so we can start having metrics for each type kind of thing. But
Well,
yeah.
and my takeaway, because I was in the citizen science panel as well, my takeaway from that research element of their best practice was, as long as there's a tangible result that's going to be used, that they're not just doing the exercise to do the exercise.
So this had a tangible.
And so this had a tangible result that they knew clearly
exhibition,
what was going to
yeah.
be done with their participation. So I think that at
That's
that
true.
level they are the
Satisfaction.
same.
Yeah, good point.
So, I'm sorry.
No, it was just a comment. Basically, the question was, were these objects, these 120 objects, already on display or not?
No, they were not on display.
Okay.
So that was one of the things.
Because one way that we see this working, I mean, I'm a little bit confused about they are curating just based on the fact that someone likes something or not, because curation is about telling a story in my experience. So that element I didn't see, although I mean it's a great interface, I like it a lot, but maybe using it for promoting objects to be on display could be an interesting proposition. You have space for 10 objects a year in your, because you have a lot of objects in your archive, and maybe use people and involve them in choosing which object you're going to display.
That was actually the first interface, my gallery.
Right.
The idea was to actually have them create a theme or a set of 10 that they liked and that related to each other. And what we found is that didn't work. They weren't interested in that as much. But that was the whole premise with the first My Gallery, was to create 10 that actually had some sort of connection or meaning. And we actually gave them some examples that we actually had the staff curate some. And it, yeah.
They don't want to behave the way we want to behave.
Yeah, that was what it came down to. But I will say there was a discussion in the museum, especially from the curators, of like, are they curating? And there was a long discussion about that. And we used the terminology, but no, you're right. I mean, curation is different. But the crowd responded to the fact that they felt like they were contributing to the process.
Exactly.
Even if we use that term more loosely, we might define it ourselves. So I do want to say that we do have Soapbox on a Microsoft Surface 2.0 downstairs at the Microsoft Research booth if you guys want to check out like how it looks in the gallery display. So thank you guys, we appreciate that. Thanks for giving us some extra time too, brother.
Yeah, so we're a few minutes over into your time.
Yeah,
Okay.
Cristiano.
let's get this
So
over.
We're going
Oh,
to
and there's a whole host of
pass
adapters
over
there.
for our third presentation from Cristiano Bianchi.
Yeah.
And he's director of Keep Thinking and manages a team across UK, US, and now Hong Kong? Soon,
Apparently, yes.
Soon Hong Kong. So multinational. He's going to talk about a product called Your Painting Tagger, which is just so rich with awesomeness, I'm not even going to try and describe it. I'll let you do that.
I think we have, there's this 9, there's something else, there's always this. Where is it gone?
Nancy?
I know you can do it. I think we are a bit in the middle because Tagger, don't know if you might have heard of it or not heard of it. It's a fairly big project. It was done last year. It's been going for a year now. And it's a bit in the middle because it uses Citizen Science Alliance in a way for which Citizen Science Alliance is not designed, because we don't have tangible results, we don't have objective results. We are tagging paintings. Tagging paintings is by nature subjective, and there are no right or wrong results. What does decide whether the tag is valid or not? Maybe we'll find out. So, what is Tagger? Tagger is basically, in essence, it is a structured way of tagging paintings. And there has been quite a lot of other tagging systems that we also have created as well, which are less structured. So the Brooklyn Museum has created a fantastic one, Steve Museum, and there are many others. This is slightly different because, and I'll tell you why this is slightly different, and it's a joint venture between the Public Catalog Foundation and the BBC. I mean, the Public Catalog Foundation, the BBC you definitely have heard of, the Public Catalog Foundation you might not, because it's a UK organization that set off 8-9 years ago. How long it was? 2005, so 7 years ago, with this fairly ambitious objective of photograph and catalog all paintings which are in public hands in the UK. Public hands means all public museums, hospitals, police stations, schools, anything which belongs to the public, to the people. They sent around a bunch of photographers, take professional pictures, and a bunch of coordinators. They were collecting information in Excel spreadsheet, and all of this was flowing into a centralized collection management system. The original purpose of the project was to print 70 catalogs and to leave something for the next generations. And at that shift, it's focused to be not only in print but also online. And it's actually en route to be completed by the end of 2012. This is what the Public Catalog Foundation is and how they work. It's a small organization, it's charity, it's charitable status, so they only receive, I think it's mostly private donations that help them complete this task. The BBC, apart from its television programs, also is committed to a lot of activities in the field of knowledge and learning online, and of course it focuses on large-scale interactive projects. So the BBC committed to create a website for your paintings. And this is what the website looks like as of today. As you can see, there are 172,000 paintings online at the moment, and you can explore in many different ways. And there's a lot of interpretation content as well. The project component is, there are quite a lot. I mean, there's a collection management system, which is our collection management system. The Universe contributed the tagging algorithms, not the tagging software, but the tagging algorithms to give us the paintings to tag and to analyze the tags at the end of it. We have a tagger interface, we have a supervisor interface to review uncertain tags. We'll go through this, and there's other stuff. And I have a diagram. No, I actually don't have a diagram. I tried to make a diagram, but really, the last time I've done it, it took an A0 sheet because it's quite a complex infrastructure, but it seems to work and it stays together. It's been working for a year and a half, so maybe it's going down this afternoon. But I'll draw you a picture if you want me to. Come and see us. It's a black box. Magic! That's all it is. It's all magic. So what are the primary goals? There's no museum involved. I mean, there are a lot of museums involved, but not as part of this project directly. So there's no museum that needs to engage their users. I mean, there are 3,000 museums behind this collection, 3,000 different collections, not only museums. But the problem is that we need, and we'll see it, because the problem is that we don't have a lot of information, because sending people around an entire country to catalog all of their paintings, it takes a lot of effort. And the only thing that you can take is essential information about those paintings, which are great, but if you want to help people finding those things, and if you want to help someone finding old pictures of cats, the artist is not going to help you. The dimension of the painting is not going to help you, so you need something else. So helping people engage with the paintings afterwards, it was one of the primary goals. But the secondary goals, which is now becoming something which is an offspring of the project, which is called the Open Network, is identifying missing information about the paintings. So it's not only engaging the audiences, but it's also helping the collection knowing their painting better. Because in certain cases, they don't know the artist, they don't know who the sitter is, they don't know when the painting was done. And there are people that have, as we discussed until now, the knowledge to help doing that. Because what we have is this. Great pictures, but you need to be a specialist to go through 220,000 paintings to find the one you want. So the making of Haga went through, it's been quite a long process. It's been about a year in designing and developing and testing, redesigning, redeveloping, retesting, redesigning, redeveloping, retesting. We went through 3 iterations of designing, user testing, and all that. Before that, we wanted to understand what our audiences want, and this was in conjunction between the Public Art Foundation and the BBC. Whether to use free tags versus structured tags, how many of them. We wanted to make it super easy, but also fun. Add some competition between users and some rewards to them. Then the more scientific part was when we needed to analyze, select, and publish, and test, and test, and test. The audience definition went through 2 types of audiences: who will use your paintings, so the public interface, and how do they want to look at paintings online, what are they interested in, how do they want them presented, how would they like to search for them. That would inform our strategy for actually creating a tagging interface. And who will tag? We have general public, but we have also specialists in the field of art history that should not be discarded. At the same time, maybe have something to say in addition to what the general public says. They can contribute the same information, but they might go a step further. And they're used in different ways. So we went through audience evaluation, we created these personas, which are the main personas. We went through quite a few of them, 6 or 7. This is just an example. This is just imagining who can use this and putting some faces to them, which of course are stock photography. And then try to understand for each type of audience what is the balance of skills do they have, how competent they are in using the web, what is their navigation skill, whether it's their browsing or search. I don't know if you're familiar with a great paper which catalogs audiences not according to what they know, but according to their attention patterns, if you want, which is going from browsing to searching to followers, searchers, what is it? Followers, browsers, searchers, and researchers. Yeah, the lateral thinkers.
Motivational categories. Yeah.
So try to see in which categories these people were belonging, and then looking in detail. So going into much more detail about what we imagine these people to do. And then we actually recruited some of these people from these categories, real people, not just stock photography, and tested the interface. So we tried coming up with concepts for how people want to search. Do they want to use a simple search? Do they want to use a free text? Do they want to use a more advanced? Do they want to use categories, and so on and so forth? And we got quite a lot of responses. And so how different audiences reacted to different ways of browsing and searching the collection then inform what type of information which should generate using the tagging process. We came up with a list of recommended facets, for instance, that we wanted to name places, we wanted to name events and artists and so on, and subjects and so on. So I'm not going to go through this. And then we tried to imagine what kind of interface. And again, all of this was on a very abstract level, but it was very useful to put these wireframes in front of people to see how they reacted. Do they really want to see all of this information, or they just want the image? At the end of this process, which went on for quite some time, we decided, or the project committee decided that there were 6 main types of tags that would have been useful to use to search and browse paintings. Types or classifications. Categories. Classification is this is a still life or a portrait, there is a landscape, there is a seascape, and so on. Very few, only 5. Categories are more complex. This is art and this is religion and myth, and then subcategories are about all of that. Things and idea, people, events, and places. There's been quite a lot of debate in terms of what do we mean by these things, because it's not very clear. Is Christmas an event, or Christmas 2001 is an event? And in our opinion, Christmas, we would like that Christmas 2001 is an event and Christmas is an idea. But it's a bit difficult to communicate these things to people. Is church a place, or is church an idea or a thing? So it's there are overlappings. So it is not rocket science. Yeah, what can you do? I mean, this is why I was saying we are in between this scientific approach. We try to be as scientific as we could, dealing with non-scientific data. And this is what the interface looks like, the third iteration. So you basically have everything on the same screen. You enter whatever you need to enter there. All the help that you need is on the screen. Wherever you, I haven't tagged 322 paintings. I'm cheating there. So I've done a few actually, but not 322. And these are the different workflows that we go through. So when you actually tag a painting, you go through every single one. You can skip any because there are no named people in this painting, so you can skip it. Or you can skip the painting because you don't like the painting. No one should be forced to tag anything they don't like. We decided to use structured, but to give the ability for people to enter free things. So, for instance, we use Multimedia as vocabulary for places, events, and people, and we use the English Oxford lexicon for things. Why? Because we tested them and they seem to work better. For instance, we tried to use geonames for places, but it was replaced by Wikipedia because geoname didn't work, because geoname is too scientific and it doesn't really have the description that we needed. And there are some self-defined vocabularies that were actually defined by University of Glasgow for categories and styles and movements. There was a lot of work in going through the list of artists and attributing artists to the correct styles and movement they might belong to, because if someone is tagging a painting, that painting is by an artist that we know, that painting can only be one of three styles. If it's painted in 1950, although it looks Baroque, it's not Baroque, it cannot be. So there was a lot of kind of pre-screening, if you want. So you start typing, and this is an event, and you type Waterloo, and you get the Battle of Waterloo as the first event that comes as suggestion. This being a lot of paintings that are on a regional level, if we were counting only on Wikipedia, we would miss out a lot of people that are not on Wikipedia, or a lot of events that are not on Wikipedia. Therefore, you don't have to use this classification. You can still type your own and submit it. The two are distinct behind the scenes. So it's designed to educate and entertain, so you can skip paintings, but at the same time you get random paintings and people loved it. It was a suggestion by actually Arvon Smith, that was giving the presentation this morning at the Citizen Science Alliance, which is the head of digital, is the one that was working on this project, that people should not be allowed to choose what they tag. They should be just given a random thing to tag. They don't like it, they skip it and go to the next one. We had a lot of feedback that this might not be a great approach, or at least give the option to select a county or a specific region, because people live there and they want to actually hook up with their community and to the local community. So this might be reviewed in the next version that we might come up with. But the beauty of having random things is you get a lot of great stuff that you wouldn't know it existed. And there's a lot of help and support. So, for instance, you can try before registering, and we went also we gave a few examples of what kind of stuff we're interested in. But it's very clear. There's no right or wrong. So just do whatever you feel like.
Can you read what was going on in the right-hand column there?
The right-hand column is this at the moment I haven't started tagging yet. I'm just testing it out. So I clicked on a button that says, okay, try it just for fun, and I enter my tags here, and they are recorded on the left-hand side. And then at the end, when I click next step, the interface will tell me this is what we would have chosen. So this is what you entered, and this is what an expert tagger would see in this picture. If you want, again, there's no right or wrong. Any tag helps. If you only see 3 things, fine. If you see 20, fine. Again,
It's teaching.
it's kind of teaching, but this is once people started using it, they didn't need it actually. Very few from our statistic, very few went through the entire set of 4 paintings. If they didn't feel confident enough, because one of the problems is that despite we say across the entire website and interface, we say many times, whatever you enter is going to be reviewed by other people, and we need to have at least 3 or 4 people saying the same things about one painting. So if only one person says that there's a cat in this picture, there probably isn't a cat in this picture. If 5 say that there's a cat in the picture, probably there is a cat in this picture. So there's a lot of statistical analysis that goes on at the end of the process, and we needed to come out with a model, and it was all experimental, but it's based on the Citizen Science Alliance paradigm that says we established threshold. Below a certain level, tags are discarded automatically. Above a certain level, they are accepted automatically. In between, there's this gray area. They are referred for further revision. So we have, compared to normal other tagging projects, we have a second level of controlling what's going on, if you want. And I'll show you that. And then there's, of course, when you ask to provide specification and you don't know what landscape is, you have some examples that tell you what landscape, and different 8 example of landscape pictures, and they tell you why this is a landscape picture as well. So it's quite thorough. And the type of people that we were targeting were the general public and expert in the history of art. And of course, when they register, and they need to register because Citizen Science Alliance cannot work with anonymous tags, so they need to know that the tags are coming all from the same people. Also because they have a way of scoring someone who always fails at tagging or gets better. So their tags assume a different meaning in time. So you create your profile, and if you're an expert, you can actually say, I'm an expert. I have this is why I am. Someone validates your profile. And if they validate your profile, you get access to also providing dates and styles, which are 2 additional workflows if you want to do it. So dates and style, we only asked for them when we don't have them, because in this case we know when the painting was done, and in this case we don't. But we provide some help. It's impossible that this painting by Shackleton was painted in 1871 because Shackleton was born in 1872. So when we have this kind of information, we use it to guide people and avoid silly mistakes. At least we don't get unnecessary noise. This was introduced in a second stage of the process, the competition and rewards. Initially, also because we didn't have the data at the beginning. We didn't know. We did know because statistics were implemented quite thoroughly from all the way through. But we didn't have data to show. But as soon as we did, we started introducing these things. And people compete massively. This is 1 week. Someone tagged 409 paintings last week. But not only that. This guy is definitely on the top. We know who he is. We interviewed him. And then instead of badges, these are kind of badges. So you can have you are a master tagger or you're a gold tagger, and these are also recognized. Obsessive tagger. We started going out and taking them out for drinks because they need to start doing something else. Actually, so with 10,000 paintings.
Counseling.
And the same thing is, and this is being designed now, it's not implemented yet, but will be on the BBC website as well. So not only the tagger, the BBC is much more visible the tagger because there are many more users that go to see the paintings than the ones that tag. And then at the end of the process, I think that our painting is going through has to be tagged at least by 20 different people before it's taken off the system. Apart from the difficult paintings that no one wants to tag. If you have a white canvas, what do you say about it? It's a white canvas. There's not much to tag. And those are referred to experts. and they have to tag them. And so the information is then collated back into Collection Manager System QI. There's a statistical analysis for tag approval that follows this universe model, and there's a panel of expert supervisor for difficult tags and difficult paintings. What are the difficult tags? The ones that don't reach the quorum. So these are, for instance, this is the supervisor interface, which is a separate interface that only 20 people have access to, and are all expert in history of art selected by University of Glasgow. And they go through, at the moment they have 1,800 paintings to review, but it's very, very quick, because what they do is that they see the tags that are already approved, and then they just have to decide on these 3 ones very quickly, clicking on the tick box or the X. So it takes virtually nothing, but the interface allows them to not be expert and pass the painting to someone else who's an expert in the field.
So already approved means that they're approved by number?
They're approved by number. But then in the collection manager system, if they want, they can still remove them. But it's just, they don't review everything. They're approved by number. They're approved by number or by the fact that they are tagged by very expert people as well. So there's a bit of combination. And the statistics are built in from the very beginning. They're very detailed, so we know every week how many people have registered, how many people have tagged, and how many paintings have been tagged, how many tags have been entered, and so on and so forth for each one of the workflow. This is just a sub-selection. We have a lot of metrics. And so, for instance, this was the last month, 463 paintings were completed. Last week, 55. Yesterday, 4, and so on. These are the total number of tags. This is just a small selection. I'm happy to show it to you in more detail. And the summary of tagger is, it is structured tag, it is authority controlled, and it is statistically analyzed, and it is expert validated. The question, and the interim result is that we have 90,000 paintings on the system at the moment, 10,000, or I think about 11,000 are completed. There are 8,000 users and about 5 million tags in a year and a bit. I would call that a success. I mean, it's a small community because it's only UK. But now people actually tag from the States as well. We have a lot of. So the next question is, and this is going to be quick, can this model be generalized? So as a design and development agency, we start to think, well, also because a lot of people asked us, so can we use this? Because it's great. I mean, of course, there's a project committee that needs to decide this, but we try to come up with a model, and this is only in black and white, where there might be a way to generalize this and allow anyone to, like in Basecamp, sign up for My Tagger or Tagger Cloud, or the name is taken, otherwise I would have registered it. But the sign up, like in Basecamp, you create your tagging project, and you give a description. You give a bunch of specifications, such as I want to see how many views are needed to complete an object, and how many tags to complete an object, and whichever is reached first is the one that decides that the object is now tagged. Because there are objects that no one tags, and it's inevitable. Again, it's a white canvas. What do you do with it? Then you upload your object, so you download a template where you have the essential information about the object, because you don't normally need the full collection management spectrum of information. You just need a few essential information about an object, which is, if it's an art collection, could be the artist, the dates, the title of the painting, so whatever you know about the object, but it's essential information. And you upload your images, and then start building your workflows. So it could be very simple. You say, well, okay, I want people, and this is the first workflow that my users need to go through, and I want them to use a free text field, or I want them to use an authority, and the authority could be the ULAN, it could be AAT, it could be any of the established authority, or you can upload your own. So there's another template for creating a vocabulary, and you upload that, and then people have to use that. But also, our suggestion is always to give people the ability to enter free tags anyway, because otherwise you constrain them too much. And again, accept the term for each workflow. You might want to decide that people are more difficult to tag, and therefore, if 3 have named the same person, you might accept it. For things, maybe you want 5. So you can control it in that sort of way. And an optional requirement to review terms in between. because not everyone has the ability to have a panel of experts that can review a tag. So it depends on how you want to play it. And then you have your monitoring interface, so you see the objects that are in the system and sort by in many different ways. So you can sort by the most viewed, and you can realize that some objects have been viewed a lot, but no one tags them. You take them out of the system, so you consider them completed, or most tagged, and so on and so forth. You can see how many steps have been taken. So this would be the first icon would be how many people have viewed it. How many viewed that, how many people have tagged it, and how many tags it received. And then you might have review panels for the object that have uncertain tags, and so you can very quickly do it. And potentially another steps that we don't have in Tagger is to do something that the Brooklyn Museum does, which is having other users on the public website review tags as well, which is in addition or as a substitution to the expert review. So you have uncertain tags, you ask your audiences to actually contribute in that way when they are on the public website. And that's it. Thank you.
We're at the end of our time, but I'm sure we're at the end of our time, but I'm sure the speakers would stick around for some questions if you have any.
Thank you.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation. One really obvious question that comes to my mind is whether you have any rights issues with the images that you're posting, or have you somehow managed to get free?
All the collection have signed up a contract that allows the PCF to use the images in different ways. One is to publish them in print, to use them on the BBC website, to use them on Tagger. So some collection don't want to be on Tagger, but they want to be on the BBC. Some collection might accept to be on both or on one of them, but only with images up to a certain size. So the interface takes all of this into account, and it is a big problem. But the rights management, as we all know, it is a bit of an issue. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you think do you see any reason why this couldn't be used for video?
I don't think there is any reason why that couldn't be used for video, because now there are technologies through which video can be tagged at not only as the video itself, but a certain specific point in time. And I'm thinking specifically of a JavaScript technology called Popcorn, which is a fantastic technology that we started using, because that allows really to interact with the video using HTML5. So yes, it's a fascinating idea.
There's some projects at the University of Amsterdam crowdsourced.
Adrian, by the way, is the one that project managed the entire Tagger process. So, yes.
And sorry, just to tag on to the end of that, no pun intended. There's some really interesting work going on now with crowdsourcing written descriptions of videos to make them more accessible. Josh Mealy presented his work at the LEAD conference at the Met a couple of weeks ago. So the combination of getting the transcription of any text, but also verbal description of what's happening. So even if nothing's being said, there's scenery passing by, they're crowdsourcing those descriptions to combine with the tagging could be a really powerful data set.
I had a question about the controlled vocabulary versus free tagging, and I think you said that it's nice to have both available. How do you present that to the end user? Are they sort of forced to pick one or two?
I can show you.
Or it's just a choice you can make up your own or use one?
The way it works, if we are connected, which we should be, they start typing and this list appears from Wikipedia or wherever it comes from, and then they can actually choose a term from the list, or they can just hit return and the tag will be accepted as a free text.
So if they start typing something that doesn't match the list, they may never see that.
Yes. Yeah. But that is among the many feedback that we had, that we never had that, because the interface kicks in after that would be the one. It's called autocomplete, that kicks in after 3 characters, so you will see it very quickly. Wikipedia has what 52 million records, I think. So it's very unlikely that you get something that is not there.
Just sorry, and back to that is that they're stored in the underlying CSA database as separate things. So you might get a word that's tagged that says this is DBpedia in the same term, but has no vocabulary associated with it. So if they are the same, then
Combine it.
R1 wrote a script to actually combine the two together. As in fact, there were two people tagged this with the same term, rather than saying that term appearing there twice, or it counting as a separate tag that then has to have reach a threshold. So it ends up in these places that there's only one of them.
But the initial idea of using this control vocabulary was not so much to use the data that is in Wikipedia and DBpedia, but to help people not avoid misspelling, if you want. So having it for that particular reason. But we still store the Wikipedia ID, because at a certain point we can also combine those two, so you can actually provide background information. So let's see if it works now. It seems to work now. Okay, so if I go there and start typing hat, this comes up fairly quickly, and you can type hate, and then decide that wasn't actually what you wanted to do, and go back. And if I type hat, that doesn't use Wikipedia, because I didn't select the tag, but it doesn't really matter.
Reception to go to, so we'll let everybody
Thank you.
know.